Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8 and Third Reich events installed, along with many other great mods. We're going to continue the clock rolling here. We've got some energy coming in, selling some more supplies to pay for that. The Vicious Trap. Also, off camera, sent a bunch of forces moving to the Czechoslovakian border. Mexico, money for fuel. No, I do not want to buy fuel. They're also all the fuel kit. Better buy steel. Money for fuel? Oh, no, thank you. Like I say, I'd rather buy steel. See who we can buy some steel from. Not from the British. Just set up some trades with. To sell steel. Really don't want to buy from the French though. No. Belgium. Okay. Will help. Area? Finland. Maybe we can get one from them. Good. Hungary. We might be able to get a few. No. Portugal. Let's see. No. Okay, one from Switzerland. Can't trade yet with the U.S. and buy U.S. steel. Oh, well, maybe they will sell us. Only if not fuel. I don't care about fuel. I don't care about fuel. Give them money. No. Okay. Accepted. Accepted. Cancelled. Grand battle plan is advanced. Okay. Okay, we stole some blueprints. Gun position and twin-engine airplanes to level 2 from Britain. So that cancelled out our research. We're again positions. Improve our ammo. Improve our high velocity ammo quality. Money for metal, yes. Rare materials, 4 down. Okay, we'll buy from Cuba. Okay, deep battle doctrine has also advanced. We'll switch that over to Blitzkrieg. Paratrooper activation, yay, yay. Bunch more opportunities to research, but the big thing there, of course, is paratroopers. We can produce those. Landing infantry now for some time. Equipment. Those are a bit later. It also opens up here as well. And let's see. Right now we're in the red in a bunch of things because we swapped over a whole lot of stuff here for getting this down fast. As you can see, I'm upgrading the cavalry regiment from the Austrian troops to a armored attachment for the division there. We're upgrading. We'll continue to produce a bunch of factories. All the equipment still coming online here. But I won't do, primarily because they have a long lead time. Just going with that, and that should be still paradroppable. I know we can attach motorcycles, but that really ramps up transport levels needed. Put them Craig's main fleet. Sure, where is there? Norway. That's friendly Norway. What more? Large caliber machine cannons. Rapid firing cannons in our aircraft. So we can do machine. We're done with that. What I like to do is mix these up a little bit. Mix a naval bomber with a float plane. The float planes, my understanding, and I don't think it's changed much, ships are good, it's good, is the best observation finding stuff at sea. Fleet Corps C. Did like it. Okay, I'll go over that in just a second here. And where the naval bombers are the best attackers of ships. So if I wanted to, this is just because it started out this way, they're all flying boats, and that's good, and I will use them for operations that way. If I wanted to do specialized operations for the naval air, like if I really thought I could kill an invasion fleet or something like that, then it would be good to concentrate the naval bombers into it, and I really think so. And so maybe that would be a good thing to do in the Mediterranean, where a lot of what you're looking at is killing not big huge death stacks of fleets, but ships being used in anti-submarine warfare, and so you're ship killers. Where I'm looking at these guys to get them out there to use them to both for anti-ship and anti-submarine, which means they're maybe they're not great at either, but they're fairly effective. So that's sort of what I try to do, is try to get the best of both worlds out between the spotting and the attack. Okay, I know those of you who watched my last series know how I like to organize up my Air Force. This is not a historical thing so much. I mean, there's elements of, I know a little bit more on the British side, fighter command and bomber command, and coastal command. That's in essence what I've done so far here for the Germans, but this is mainly because I'm human. I'm not computerized AI. I don't know where all the units are. So I like to put, as the board spreads out and things don't necessarily hold it strictly to this rule, but generally speaking, for here, I like to put all the fighters under Flieger Corps F, basically Flieger Corps fighter. And this way I can quickly look at them and see where they are, their status, whether they're at full strength, whether they're full organization or not. Are they, do they have current orders or not? So once we're in the operations against British bombers, you can quickly see who's shot up and needs to be rested, who's had been resting but is all well organized up and ready, but not under any orders to operate. So you just see them here, and if you sent them off to do something way off somewhere, they're still here, and so you know, oh, wait a minute, I need fighters. Is there anybody not active? Well, who's not active? And then you find somebody if you've left them down here or something. Easy to find them with just one click on the HQ. The other one here is Flieger Corps B for bombers. This is just an escorted bomber unit. Close escort. I like to, and what I will do, and I didn't do last time, I'm going to go in to the files, and what I'm going to do is just, there's a unit priority for display here. That's all it does, and I'm going to move it to a low priority so that the twin engine fighters, so I use them as escorts, so I'm going to move them to lower priority than all the other bombers so I can quickly, because my idea was they would all eventually have at least one escort craft. I look at the escorts not as the solution, meaning once they're escorted they're fine. No, I want the fighters to come and engage and kill the enemy fighters and win the air war. But for the initial contact, when the enemy initially comes after my bombers with their fighters, I want at least one escort. It doesn't have to be a great escort, and I like the twin engines because they have a greater range. So they don't, once you put the escorts, they don't quite have as big a range, but they'll still have a decent range. So I want them immediately close escorted with one of those, and this is obviously Bomber Command theoretically, and Flieger Corps C is theoretically Coastal Command. He's going to maintain my anti-shipping, naval air, that's how it starts out. I also, once I get another Flieger Core, it'll be Flieger Core T, and I'll put all the transports. And that's one of the things easy for me to at times to lose transport, because invading in Russia particularly, you want some supplies. It's really quick to go to click on Flieger Core T to see if there's any transport planes aren't doing anything. Just sitting there and you go, oh, we could use those. And so it's a really easy to find and manage your air power. And where it sort of starts to break down is, as I normally create Flieger Core East for non-German speakers, which is normally combined arms to some degree, just units that I'm sort of sticking in the East. Don't quite fit the logic, and sometimes I'll just, without switching commands, I'll just transfer some of the fighter command over to the East or something, like that. So it's not a universal everything always. And then I will, like for a Mediterranean type command, create another one that often be a multi-types in it. So yeah, I break my own rules, but at least starting out, and for the main batch, I like to keep those organized out there. Once we get a few more HQs from events, I will put most of the Flieger cores under them, so that they're quick, easy to find. Find units inactive, active. Good way to organize them. I don't think these traits that are showing up here, maybe the supplies, but I don't think most of the traits translate into the air units. These traits, when they're an air leader and they're assigned to the air command, I do think the traits work for them, but still I like to put sea command people under sea, naval air, and similarly. It just, how I deal with things, I guess, rather. Whether there's any real bonus or not, I don't think there is. Okay, rare materials. No. I'll do some American and Soviet. Bulgaria. Okay. We want to have good relations with Bulgaria. Okay, close air support prototypes have advanced. I want some armor plating. It increases build time and it slows it down. Reduces range, but some armor plating I think is good. Now I don't know that I'm going to walk all the way up to 6 even if I could as time goes on, but no, Poland, I don't think so. Thank you. Okay, let's see how some of the other nations are doing. Oh, well, the Republicans are really losing there. That'll be over soon. South Africa, rare materials. Oh, thank you. We'll get back to producing all these things very soon. Nav air pilot training. Switch that over to ground crew now. Oh, and the various nav air is also useful for ground attack as well. It's not that useful, and of course you can use standard bombers for various sea operations, though they don't seem to have nearly, and I can go in and look if I really felt the need to, but as good as spotting operations. So if you have, well, we got two light armor designs have advanced. What's the other one here? Medium armor designs have advanced. Okay. So if you have some good naval air flying, they'll often spot the enemy, particularly submarines, but the enemy shipping, enemy submarines, and if you also have regular bombers operating naval attacks in the area, they'll often join in the attack. But I wouldn't want to rely upon them as your primary means of observation and attack solely independently. And we'll do tank destroyers. Oh no, we're already on that. Okay. Okay. Italy. Okay. Got you already in the Axis. Not that we have to coax you in more, but Cyan, no. How's Japan doing here in China? We're doing fairly well. Got ability to engineer planes. I wouldn't let that go because it's still somewhat behind date-wise. Now, we have gone below there, so we can do Munich Treaty. Okay, well I'm going to save this because I'm hoping for a good outcome here. And it has the ability to spiral out of control, and it could be an interesting game, but I don't know that I want to play it for a long-term game. What I'd be willing to do in a personal game versus sort of the goals and objectives with playthrough. Different. Okay, Treaty of Munich. As you know, we have been talking a lot about the various German plans to disrupt Czechoslovak's national identity, to inflame locally German speakers' dissent with the Czech government. I don't think many of them really ever had any significant Czech identity. If they, or at least their parents, definitely the German speakers had the identity of being part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Whether they thought that made them better than Bohemians or Moravians, as they might have seen it, or Slovakians, or even Hungarians, I don't know. But they didn't have this sort of border separating them from Austria. Austria just sort of flowed into it, and there were administrative borders, yes, but you flowed in. You know, it wasn't nearly as arbitrary. And I do believe Germans, at least like government jobs, and similarly had preferences within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So I don't think it was hard or difficult or entirely artificial, shall we say, the sentiment to join Germany. But Germany was definitely engineering this, and part of what it was doing was not just disrupting the Czech situation. They were justifying it to the German people, as well as, and I think more importantly, justifying it to particularly British and France, but world opinion in general, was that the German speakers, as I'm sort of calling them, versus as they would have said Germans, but there is a difference between language, there is a difference between ethnic identity, as well as a difference between citizenship. Being a national of a country versus being ethnically related to the people. so they were definitely German speakers. But that Germany was somewhere between moving in to protect an oppressed minority, as well as just reuniting people to Germany and justifying it, you know. So to keep Britain and France out of the situation. I have fully come to believe that Hitler wanted a war in 1938 against Czechoslovakia. I think he entirely wanted a war with Czechoslovakia. I don't know what his ideas were. I don't know if there's... So I've read Inside the Third Reich, the autobiography of, that was many years ago when I read it, of Albert Speer. I've read John Toland's Adolf Hitler, and several other things. I don't know that any of those books, they talked about what he would have done with the Slovak regions, this half of the country. Whether he would have set it up as an independent country, as a puppet country, or just taken it all. I don't know what he would have done with that had he gotten his war. But he desperately wanted a war. But he did not want a war with Britain and France. He was entirely not ready for it, not capable of it. Had these countries been a bit more military prepared, and had they, in a mindset way, been very military prepared, it could have meant the collapse of Hitler had they gone to war and been vigorous about it. Now, I think the main reason Hitler wanted a war was what Italy had down here as a training war. They wanted to, you know, they had a war again. They had a war with a foregone conclusion. Italy was going to win. Abyssinia, for whatever reasons, had not prepared a, and maybe just that they didn't even see it as a likelihood, but as a, you know, a guerrilla resistance movement set up and wage, you know, just plan on letting the enemy, almost just letting the enemy march into all the big cities, and then the war is going to start the day after Italy controls all the territory. Do that type of war, which can be called terrorist operations or guerrilla operations. To me, the sort of defining point is, are you routinely attacking homesteads with women and children in them and killing everybody there, men, women, and children, or are you attacking government military patrols and only destroying the crops or similar sorts of thing of farmers to economically ruin them? That's sort of where I personally draw the line between terrorists and guerrilla fighters in conventional warfare. But they didn't really seem to have that. They're not to say that there wasn't ongoing situations, but there was already ongoing situations in Abyssinia, because there were various, whether they would come off as different ethnic groups or just different tribal groups. Some of them were Islamic, where Ethiopia was Christian and is still to this day Christian. Those groups had been at different times some levels of rebellion from the central government, and actually welcomed the Italian troops coming in there. So, but it was a foregone conclusion that Italy was going to win there. Hitler thought it was going to be a foregone conclusion that they were going to defeat the Czechs, and in my opinion, once they got Austria, particularly here, there's not enough defenses, but even if they threw up some defenses or had them there, it's just extending the border that much more. And if you defend everywhere, you defend nothing, and I don't see how, you know, you can't just put a nice spearhead into there, take Brno here and a few of the other arms centers here, and just cut the country off. What had been when Austria existed, this had been a reserve, a defense in depth, if you will, or a strategic depth. Now it just becomes a liability, because you have to more securely defend it. So it just more territory to deal with, and no longer territory likely not to be attacked. That manpower reserves, um, various other abilities, so it becomes more of a liability. And so you can't just put a ring around this capital and hold out indefinitely. So it is, in my opinion, a foregone conclusion on its own that Czechoslovakia is going to fall to Germany. Just depends on how hard the fight is. Hitler wanted that. Hitler wanted to train up his fighting capabilities. Hitler at this time in 1938 was not thinking in the terms of blitzkrieg. He is not a forward thinker in warfare. He very much views war, and I think all the way through to the end, in a World War I mindset. He does come to see, once it's demonstrated to him, the blitzkrieg, but I don't still ever think he ever gets that mindset, because he's always wanting to hold territory, never wanting to retreat, never understanding that you can quickly pull all your troops out, and then as the enemy tries to move in the vacuum, you can surround them and cut them up and destroy them better. No, he always wanted to hold that line, never one step back. Even when it made sense, it was, never, when they were doing the back and forth wars here, he would never approve any retreats, ever. When, Rommel or whatever will, hey, well, if I just retreat back to here, I can, or, retreat back to here, I can get supplies, and then once they follow me, I'm going to come out and cut off their armored spearhead and destroy it, and then they're going to be unable to attack, and I'll be able to have a few weeks to get more supplies, and then I'll roll. No, it was always hold whatever territory you could. So this is my opinion. Hitler was a very bad military leader, always stuck from his World War I experience of holding territory and attacking to gain territory. Sure, he saw demonstrated the blitzkrieg and how it could quickly gain territory and these new mastery weapons of the future, and he liked them, but he never understood that, yes, and it was always his, because he understood, I would say, the economics of war in the sense of needing food, raw materials, industry, those kind of things, which you can't just pick up and move fields, you can't just pick up and move mines, you can move industry, but that's not very rapidly. We saw Soviets do it particularly, but you can't constantly shift that around in a fluid method for sure. So yeah, there is some limits you have to decide, in a maneuver warfare. Here, we're going to hold here because they're critical things, but other places you could fall back when it's timely to fall back, not just when you can't hold anymore, then go back, like say the winter retreat. And the first winter, Germany lost lots of equipment because they did not have antifreeze in their trucks or their tanks, or half tracks or whatever. So they lost tons of equipment because they couldn't get it operating. They lost more equipment because of trucks, particularly because it couldn't operate in the snow. And so lots of wounded that would have, some of the wounded weren't combat wounded, they were cold weather wounded, frostbite and stuff, that may or may not be continuing to be effective soldiers because of frostbite, but could be some levels of workers still at home once they healed up, that had you, and they were incapacitated to the sense that they couldn't walk out, but had you had trucks, they could have moved them out. So they lost lots of manpower stupidly, and they tried to hold until they couldn't hold anymore, instead of early on in the whole situation realize, oh, there's a counterattack. Who cares about a half-ruined factory or a city that is a shell of itself? Sure, a city that's a shell is a better place to start, rebuilding things, because they have sewers and other things that may not be fully functioning, but you don't have to build from afresh. You can get back going. But who the hell cares a half-used, half-functioning factory? Let's just get the hell out, and we'll be back in 3 months. But no, that wasn't Hitler's idea, so Hitler lost many man, equipment, other things, that for lack of timely retreats and lack of being able to do maneuver warfare. Okay, so he saw the Czechoslovakian situation in that terms. It was ringed with forts. It was going to be like World War I, but they now had the air power and they had these other things. But they wanted to train up and experience up this new German army because sure, the upper level officers and very few NCOs were maybe World War I vets by this time, but most of these people are new. Now they've gone through in various training courses at earlier stages that were trained up by stormtroopers in the World War I sense, not the SA sense. You know, small infantry tactics and other elements like that in their schools for their officers and their NCOs. So they had a good, and they did, which showed it, they had a good grasp of these things. But these soldiers, this wasn't a veteran army. He wanted to turn it into a veteran army. He wanted a war in Czechoslovakia. He wanted it desperately. But, like I was saying, he didn't want the war with Britain and France and potentially others. But those were the two biggies. He knew Belgium wasn't going to come to Czechoslovakia's defense if Britain and France were. He knew Poland, as we've shown, was already agitating for mainly just this little bit here, but agitating in Czechoslovakia and wasn't standing firm and strong by them. But even if they would have, without Britain and France, they wouldn't have mean a loss in the war. But had Britain and France really, not just a few diplomats, a few government people like Churchill, but the whole national government setup had been pushing behind it and seeing what was happening. They had to see what was happening in Slovakia or in Czechoslovakia, see what was happening. They had to see that, so they knew what was going on. Had they seen when they saw that, had they started to work with the Czechs and had they started to work with the Poles, they could have set up a two-front war, but they didn't. So, and Hitler knew this. So Hitler knew that he could go in and he wanted this war. What happened was, and we'll see if we get this in our first attempt through it, was that really it was Chamberlain convinced the Czechs not to fight. I don't know whether it was the naivete of Chamberlain in thinking that, well, Hitler is, a bit of a nutty chap, but he's all right. He just wants his Sudeten Germans in with Germany. I sort of understand that because he's, I'm sure, thinking, and I would at the time, well, hey, if there were some Englishmen living in, Calais or something like that had been English, but France had gotten it back, and we just want the English of Calais back. We're not asking for, all of northern France or northwest France or whatever you want to say. We just want Calais back, as he might see it. Well, so this is what, and that's right, that's fair, okay, let them have it back. And that's how he, I think, was really seeing the situation and not seeing it as a stepping stone. Had he saw it as a stepping stone, I don't know if he would have advised them not to fight, and that he may still have, just on the idea that he knew he wasn't going to be able to get his country, and he didn't have the stomach to get his country into war over Czechoslovakia. And I think he also, I'm going to guess he was smart enough to realize France was a fractured country at the time. They weren't going to wholeheartedly, it's one thing to declare war and man your Maginot Line and try to do a blockade of German trade and whatever, and isolate Germany while we're technically at war with them, and hopefully they won't bomb our cities and we won't bomb theirs unless they bomb ours kind of war. And even if you're having that kind of war, you're not saving Czechoslovakia. You're just going to war with somebody and hanging out. So even if he may have thought that that's what would have happened, and thought that the Nazis weren't as deeply evil as they were, so that you're going to have a few, 10, 20 years of hard times, but we realized the war, and I think Chamberlain did sort of realize, because there was a British military buildup after, particularly the second part, when Germany took all the rest of Czechoslovakia. But there was already, or even earlier, startings of the military buildup. He realized that there was likely war coming. He starting to wanted to prepare Britain for that. After this situation, he may have already been seeing that, well, hey, we're going to have to fight in another war. Hopefully be the prime minister after me. We'll have peace for our time. For now, you'll have hard knocks for a while, Czechs, but just live with it, and in 20 or 30 years you'll be free again. That's maybe what he was thinking. Don't know. Not a big scholar. I haven't read any biographies. Just a few articles on Chamberlain, but no biography. But he may have been thinking in those terms as well. I don't know. I'm just trying to put myself in the place of a leader of a country that's put in a situation that is beyond what they think is capable of dealing with. I think he saw Britain capable of defending itself, but having the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force sitting out here, keeping it safe is not saving Czechoslovakia. There's a difference there. And he knew, and I think he was right, that Britain wasn't prepared to be able to save Czechoslovakia. So now we'll get into even more of this with the Treaty of Munich. This is going to be the Treaty of Munich episode. Okay. As Chamberlain is realizing that Hitler is stirring up a war, internal violence and disruption in Czechoslovakia, Chamberlain asked Hitler for a personal meeting to find a solution. He wanted to avert the war. There's Chamberlain, there's Ribbentrop, back of Hitler. Is that, I don't know, it could be Hitler's driver there? Or is that an NSK? I think it may be an NSKK cap. They're very similar to the SA, but they have a different thing. Well, the reason I was thinking maybe it's Hitler's driver. Hitler's personal driver was an SA man. And even he stayed in the SA for the whole time. He never switched over to the SS. He was always Hitler's personal driver through to the end. Basically, I don't know, 45, whatever happened to him, I just don't know. But he was and so you often see the one SA guy standing around with a bunch of SS guys in photographs from Berchtesgaden, because he knew them all. I mean, they were all, working on the same staff area, but he was SA and sort of a rarity within them. So, Chamberlain wants to avert war just on general principle, but maybe, like I was saying, also on the idea that he didn't want Britain at this time dragged into it. So this is interesting. His initial meeting doesn't solve anything. Then there's continues. He goes to Bad Godesberg for further talks with Hitler over the crisis. Hitler demands German occupation of all Germans in the Sudeten territories by October 1. That night, after a telephone conference, Chamberlain reverses his opinion and advises the Czechs to mobilize for war. So first he's going, hey, let this go. Then he's advising them to mobilize for war. I don't know if he means it or simply trying to strengthen his bargaining position, in the sense that war is coming. You better accept my solution, or you will have war. Which Hitler wanted war, but. So I think it was somewhat of a bluff. Again, there's Ribbentrop, Chamberlain, I forget who that is, one of the German generals. So we gain lots of dissent here because we're now facing a possible war. Germany loses some neutrality, and relations go to hell with Czechoslovakia, of course, because we're threatening war. Now, with this, the setup is now the big Munich crisis meeting. Mussolini steps in at this point. He asks for a delay of the starting of the war, that he wants to come in and try to mediate the crisis. So they get in Munich now. Mussolini comes up. It's Count Ciano, his son-in-law and foreign minister. They get Edward de Daladier, this shorter gentleman here, Premier or President of France, I forget, sorry guys. I don't study up on these particularly beforehand. And then of course there's Chamberlain there, to get there and have a meeting over what's going to happen with Czechoslovakia. If you happen to notice, there's no Czechs in the room. There's no Czech ambassador in Germany. There's no Czech ambassador anywhere else. There's no Czech foreign minister. Edward Bernays isn't there. There's no Czechs in the room, even observing the decision of what's going to happen with Czechoslovakia. That's a medal that was struck just immediately post this event. There's the signatures, Neville Chamberlain, you see there. I think that's Adolf Hitler there. That's Mussolini's there, and that would be Gladier's signature there. That's an actual photograph from the, the document's larger, but it's the photograph of the signature portion of the Munich Agreement. Is it going to be war or peace? 80% chance peace for our time, 20% chance we'll look at war. Peace for our time. Often it's called peace in our time, but it's actually peace for our time. Chamberlain medal there, newspaper headline, if you mount the window. Sort of the famous photograph at the airport where he's holding up the paper that's blowing in the wind. He's not so much waving it, it's just the wind's blowing. So now, again, pause. I think it was Hadler. I forget, there were a couple other generals, and I don't want to guess too much, but I think it was Hadler, but I'm not absolutely sure, who was in charge of the Berlin garrison, and several other generals, seeing that leading up to this crisis, that this was going to mean war with Britain and France, slightly before this time, obviously. And they were preparing for a coup against the Nazi government. They contacted some people in the British Foreign Office and told them very clearly that they were prepared for a coup against Hitler if and only if Britain were to go to war with Germany at this time and demonstrate that they were actually going to fight the war. That didn't mean that they had to, bomb Berlin into rubble or anything, but it had to be more than just simply what would appear at least to be like a phony war declaration. It had to be something that to demonstrate there's going to be a real war. British Navy off the German coast, dealing with blockading Britain, had to be some level of offensive against the Germans. Because realize at this point here, we have here so far, and they were still building up, only level 2 pillboxes in games terms. But the West Wall was not what the West Wall is going to become later on in history, or in just short here. They did not have very strong defenses here, and I'm sure they had more troops here than we do. But so France, if they had mobilized and moved and taken Saarbrücken or wherever, taken some stuff, they communicated that they were willing to, at that point, but only at that point, stage a coup against Hitler. Well, this is one of the reasons I like the SA order battle, is it shows that who's stronger right now. You got all these SA units, yeah, and I've left them this way without an HQ. I've thought about some of them should probably have an NSKK transport unit. They don't have artillery, they don't have heavy weapons, but this says SA Standarten here, where it says SA Brigade here. I've used Standarten to represent brigades. Brigades had basically, I think, between 3 and 7 Standarten. If I had put the SA, and that, now Standarten also varied in size, they weren't a uniformed size either, so that varied too. But if I had put the full order of battle there, and we can discuss how strong the Ritter SA was, and I'm very unsure. I know about all the, or about a certain number of their number and where they were located up to about 75. Beyond that, I don't have information. There were more, numbered higher, but I don't have good information of where they were located, so I didn't include them. And I don't know how strong each one of the Standarten were in effective strength. But I do have a bit better on the brigades. So, no, they weren't the army. I'm not trying to suggest that they were the army. But imagine they're bigger than the army. They're at this time approximately 1.5 million men. I really don't think the rest of the German armed forces were 1.5 million men. Obviously, we've been not maybe building up as much as we could because we've been building ICs to this point. So, but still, the idea that if the coup happens, you could have a shift in government, or if, and as I've talked to Noah other times, that if the coup fails in the sense that, particularly Goering, but Hitler, Goering, those two, if either one of those escapes the net in the initial arrests, I think there's a good chance that the SA and the SS similarly would fight. And there's like Richnow, higher-ranking general. He was very, very much a National Socialist. He would have, and any troops that he could have convinced would have stuck on Hitler's side. Now now I don't know whether Goebbels, he was a good propaganda guy, so he could maybe have rallied people. Rudolf Hess, he spoke, people heard him on the radio and saw him and things, but he wasn't going to be something that the Nazis were going to rally around. Few others maybe, but Himmler wasn't very popular. He was well organized, so if he escapes the net, he could definitely organize the SS to fight, but he isn't going to motivate the SA to fight. So it varies, in my opinion, who gets out if they fight. But if they get enough of the top leadership, I don't think the SA is going to do this. And also, and part of the commitment for the German generals to launch the coup was they'd need a commitment that once it happened, all offensive operations against Germany were going to have to stop immediately. So even though you're still at war, they're not saying you're not to be at war, but no more attacks, because it would force the German army to defend Germany, and they couldn't necessarily control the SS, the SA, possibly the Luftwaffe, depending on where it goes, and with Goering and whatever. And so they knew that they would have potential problems, and the German soldiers might see it as a betrayal by the military leadership if they were allowing Allied occupations of Germany. So it would have to, after an initial offensive near the border regions, they'd have to stop. They would need a good commitment for that. I think that if you go back to when the Chamberlain was suggesting that the Czechs mobilize to fight, I think maybe some of the foreign ministry people that were in contact with some of the German generals may have had a quiet word with Chamberlain at the time, but this was not, to my understanding, a lot of dialogue with Chamberlain about this. It was more between a few generals with a few contacts and with foreign minister types, not the minister himself, but ambassadors and other staff in the diplomatic service, contacts that were then transmitting these informations very quietly, very securely up to British command, so they were getting some of the information. But the Germans weren't giving out complete details, like just how many generals were going to revolt or whatever. And I think it looked a little shady to Chamberlain and the other people sitting back in London as to whether, not maybe that some of the German generals were, because why would the German generals push for a fight I think they believe the ones that were pushing wanted it to happen. Whether they could have gotten the bulk of the German army to go along with them, I think they were worried about. And once you go to war, can't go, oops, sorry, I thought your coup was going to work. No harm, no foul. We'll go back to peace. We'll have peace now. No, you're at war, and it's going to be troublesome. And it might not be World War II in the sense that either France and Britain are going to lose or Germany's going to lose, and it might just be a border wars and then peace negotiations and other sort of stuff. And so if you have a border war and then you have peace negotiations that leave good chunks of Czechoslovakia in Germany's hand, you sort of lost that war, and so you've diminished French and British reputation around the world, where here you've got their reputation enhanced around the world. He's created peace. He's given, basically Chamberlain, has given the Sudetenland, not his territory, to Germany, and we're going to have peace now. While the Western powers quietly rearm, while Germany noisily continues to arm. But that's sort of the situation that might take on all of this. You can read, obviously, here or on your own playthroughs, more of the detail. So that is how I interpret the Munich Treaty, Munich Agreement. Also very much enhances Mussolini's status as a power broker, not so much as a peacemaker. Oh, one other thing. This whole thing pissed Stalin off all to hell. He was raging, upset. He felt just entirely angered at everybody, but particularly the Western powers. He knew the Western powers didn't like him, but he was still the sort of Far Eastern counterbalance to the the Nazis, the sort of the traditional French allies, were the Russians over the this type of situation. And since he was not invited, he was not in that room in Munich, he was pissed as hell. That is why he signs the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. As with some things I know I've said before, and with so many people, I look at history as it's a series of causes and effects, and shifting around, and how it all sort of ties together. And so this happens, so these other things happen, and why they happen and how they happen. So you would not, in my opinion, under any circumstances, have had the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact had the Munich Agreement not gone down the way it had gone down. Had either no agreement happened and Germany, goes to war with Czechoslovakia, it wouldn't have happened. Had Stalin been invited as the other major power broker in the world or in Europe to the meetings, had he been there, might not have changed anything, any facts on the ground or what the results were, but had he been included, he would not have felt as betrayed or isolated or just thought of as irrelevant by the Western powers. He would not have made his alliance, because that's what, in essence what it was an alliance with Hitler. He would not have done that with Hitler. Just like when France and Britain upset Mussolini over Ethiopia, that drove Mussolini into Hitler's arms. This is what starts moving Stalin into Hitler's sphere of influence, even though they're bitter enemies, and what allows World War II to start. It's all this cause and effect. If you didn't have this, you wouldn't have that. And it's not just simply a steps thing. It's more than that. So you would not have had this. So if you've noticed, our descent has raised all the way to 8.8 because we've been facing war, and Germany, the German public, has been very much concerned, are we going to war or not? But no war, so now we've already gone down to 5 because there's going to be peace, people are happy again, gain some manpower, gain some more manpower for reading all those Sudeten's in here. So we'll let this roll a bit. Okay. Bank for international settlement. Yes, I'll do some supplies. Big money, give me more money. Improved overseas. Some more leadership because I've taken a few territories, I think. Okay, I think we're going to end the episode there. Thank you for viewing. I hope you have enjoyed all the talks that I've been giving and my thoughts on history. If you have any questions on it, I'd be happy to answer them. Not that I'm going to necessarily give you great detail, but just what else may have been going on. And as you can see now with the new national borders here, this becomes entirely ineffective as a country to defend. There is just, once you got rid of, quickly, you can look at the old border here. There's at least hills and forests, along with, just the defensive line buildup that would allow defense. I remember reading a lot about the Potato War. That was the last war of Frederick the Great. It was fought over Bohemia. Called the Potato War because there were no real battles in the war. Frederick was trying to come into here to take the territory, and there was a lot of skirmishes between the sides. There was a lot of Jaeger type units, Freikorps type units battling each other from the Austrians and the Prussian side, and a lot of what they were fighting over was potatoes because the season, the foraging troops going out to try to collect supplies from the land were going out and digging up potatoes with their bayonets. And so it became known as the Potato War. And it was a brief war, like I say, no major battles. It was basically the last war. Frederick the Great, he was getting old by that time. But, and that was happening, I forget the exact year, 1776, 78, but it was going on right around the time of the American Revolution. And they were trying to come in here, and the rough terrain really impeded them. So they had a chance of defending that borders. Once we get into here, you can see open plains, relatively speaking. And so there's, okay, you got some rivers here, and have a neat siege battle for a few months, but you aren't going to win that war under any real conceivable way. So, thanks so much.